Ladies and gentlemen, we cordially invite you to be seated at a seat provided since our seminar is about to begin. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we cordially invite you to be seated at the seat provided since our seminar is about to begin. Thank you. Once again, we cordially invite you to be seated at the seat provided since our seminar is about to begin. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Very good morning, the Honorable Miss Mashita Kristalin, Special Advisor to the Minister of Finance for Macroeconomics and Fiscal Policy, Miss Damilola Ogunbi, CEO and Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General for Sustainable Energy for All, and co-chair of United Nations Energy, Mr. Winfried Wicklin, Director General Southeast Asia, Asian Development Bank, our prominent speakers, moderator, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to welcome all of you to Jakarta on Seminar on Renewable Energy Manufacturing Opportunities for Southeast Asia. I'm Rumanda Lubis, and it's my honor to be your master of ceremony for today's event. Ladies and gentlemen, we will start the seminar with introductory remarks from our honorable guest. First, I would like to invite Special Advisor to the Minister of Finance for Macroeconomics and Fiscal Policy. Please welcome Ms. Mashita Kristalin.
Good morning. Is it on? Okay. Good morning, honorable speakers and panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. It is my great honor to deliver the introductory address in this seminar on renewable energy manufacturing in ASEAN. This seminar aims to share and present a report assessing the potential of renewable energy manufacturing in Southeast Asia. The report is a result of collaboration between ADB, Bloomberg Philanthropies, Climate Works, and Sustainable Energy for All. This seminar is timely given the effort needed to develop the massive amount of renewable energy required in the region. As we already know, the government of Indonesia has already increased the renewable energy mix target from 25% in 2025 to 31% in 2050. This target shows that Indonesia's undeniable commitment for climate action. In addition to this target, the government has already set ambitious goals and taken significant steps towards its commitment to address climate change and leading transition towards a low-carbon economy. The need for reducing carbon emission and embracing clean energy source has never been more urgent, especially in Southeast Asia, where climate change impact is actually disproportionately high. 5 countries in this region are ranked among the world's top 20 most vulnerable to climate change. Furthermore, this region could lose up to 30% of GDP by 2050 due to increase in global temperature and extreme weather events. To limit global warming to a 1.5-degree pathway, greenhouse gas emission in Southeast Asia must be reduced to 25% by 2030, a reduction of around 10% relative to its current trajectory. At the same time, the remarkable economic expansion and population growth in the region have led to a significant increase in energy consumption. Between 2020 and 2050, energy consumption for transport will be more than double, while the overall demand for electricity will be 2.5 times compared to its 2020 level. This means we need substantial and collective action globally, not just at the local level, by all parts of the society. A major push to electrify transportation and deploy renewable energy will be essential for the region. By doing so, the region could meet rising energy demand and lowers carbon emission at the same time. Moreover, the development of local manufacturing capabilities could also support job creation and also economic growth. This report has also shown that Southeast Asia, low carbon mobility and clean power have the potential to contribute between around 90 to 100 billion in revenue by 2030, creating 6 million jobs in the renewable energy sectors by 2050. Southeast Asia has abundant renewable energy potential and a solid foundation for developing renewable energy. The report says that this region already produced 9 to 10% of the world's solar photovoltaic cells, up to 50% of global nickel output, and 6 to 10% of all electric two-wheelers today. It also has natural advantage to support the scale-up of production. 16 terawatt of technical solar potential, 25% of global nickel reserve, and 10% of cobalt, as well as 25% of the global two-wheelers market. Ladies and gentlemen, all of these potential are not without challenge. Many of Asia's heavily emitting power plants, which primarily burn coal, are much younger than comparable ones in the developed economies. This would create higher stranded asset costs to these countries, which then implies the need for higher investment and also cost sharing to phase out these plants and scale up renewable energy infrastructure. We need to create a robust and inclusive financing system for transition projects to be able to facilitate this ambition, not only with the Asia-Pacific region, but also from the US and the Europe. Increasing the pipeline of bankable project, development of transition finance infrastructure, including the taxonomy for transition, are imperative to build the ecosystem for transition finance. This cannot be achieved without proactive public sector involvement, government and MDBs, to reduce the risks involved in financing transition projects. Concessional finance can be used to crowd in private financing by lowering investment costs and also decreasing risk through equity or credit enhancement. MDBs can also leverage private capital with innovative approach, such as equity investment. Expanding the role of MDB, and hence MDB reform, is even more important in order to scale up climate finance in the midst of uncertainty, higher cost of capital, and challenging geopolitical landscape. Ladies and gentlemen, the path towards renewable energy development could not be achieved alone. It should be a collaborative effort between government, financial institutions, MDBs, industrial leaders, and civil society to work together and envision a future where renewable energy becomes the foundation of sustainable development across ASEAN nations. Let us remember that our discussion today could shape the future for the next generation Southeast Asia. I'll stop here. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Ms. Masjida Kristalin. Ladies and gentlemen, now we are going to listen the introductory remarks that delivered by CEO and Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General for Sustainable Energy for All and co-chair of the United Nations Energy, Ms. Damilola Ogunbi.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to speak with you today. Southeast Asia, with a rapidly growing population and booming economy, is expected to significantly increase its energy demand in the years to come. At the same time, the region will be impacted disproportionately by climate change. 5 out of 10 economies rank among the world's top 20 countries most vulnerable to climate change, and the region could lose up to 30% of its gross domestic product by 2050 due to increases in global temperature and extreme weather events. The need for reducing carbon emissions and embracing cleaner energy sources has never been more urgent. Southeast Asia, with its significant carbon footprint, must take the lead in adopting renewable energy solutions to mitigate the effects of climate change and protect our fragile ecosystems. A major push to electrify transportation and deployment of renewable energy will be essential for the region to meet its decarbonization commitments. This has the potential to enable the region to meet rising energy demand while lowering carbon emissions. At the same time, this calls for scaling up renewable energy manufacturing in the region to drive economic growth and support job creation. As we transition from traditional energy sources to renewables, we open the door to innovative industries and emerging technologies. By investing in renewable energy infrastructure, we lay the foundation for a thriving green economy that fosters entrepreneurship and attracts sustainable investment. Not only will this boost GDP growth, but it will also enhance the livelihoods of citizens and promote social development. For example, it is expected that low carbon mobility and clean power have the potential to contribute up to 100 billion in revenue by 2030, while creating 6 million jobs in the renewable energy sector by 2050. Ladies and gentlemen, Southeast Asia has significant untapped renewable energy potential and strong existing manufacturing capabilities. The region already produces at least 9% of the world's solar photovoltaic cells and modules, and about 50% of global nickel output, and no less than 6% of all electric two-wheelers today. It also possesses natural advantages to support the scale-up of production with 16 terawatts of technical solar potential, 25% of global nickel reserves, 10% of cobalt reserves, and 25% of global two-wheeler markets. This presents a major opportunity to build the next generation of renewable energy manufacturing and industrial capabilities to meet local demand and play a central role in the region and global supply chains. Today, it is with pride and excitement that we gather here today to launch the report, Renewable Energy Manufacturing Opportunities for Southeast Asia. This report is a result of a collaboration between Sustainable Energy for All, the Asian Development Bank, Bloomberg Philanthropies, and ClimateWorks Foundation, and represents a significant milestone in our shared journey towards a greener and more sustainable planet. It explores how the development of renewable energy manufacturing sectors in Southeast Asia can be supported and how countries can reap its immense commercial and economic benefits. From improving manufacturing processes to boosting supply chain efficiency, ease of doing business, and reducing costs, this report lays the foundation for a roadmap towards a prosperous, resilient, and eco-friendly energy sector. Moreover, the report underscores the importance of intra-regional collaboration and diverse supply chains in achieving energy transition objectives. Growing Southeast Asia's solar market, battery market, and electric two-wheeler industries present significant revenues and job creation opportunities. And I'd like to invite all policymakers, industry, and other ecosystem players to use this report in jointly scaling up renewable energy manufacturing efforts. Together, we can ensure Southeast Asia's development follows a sustainable trajectory while generating employment and economic value for local communities. This way, we can achieve a truly just and clean energy transition in line with our collective energy and global goals. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Damilola. Now I would like to invite Director General Southeast Asia, Asian Development Bank. Please welcome Mr. Winfried Wickley.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Good morning, everyone. It's great to be back in Indonesia. Dear Ibu Masita, thank you very much for hosting us, and thank you to Damilola for the remarks and greetings. Greetings also to colleagues from various partners and friends that we're working together with, the UN family, Bloomberg, we have Climate Works, we have McKinsey, we have Sustainable Energy for All. Kadin colleagues are here as well. Good morning. Really great pleasure for me to join Ibu Masjita and Damilola in opening this seminar, this rather auspicious occasion. We are in the midst of the ASEAN finance ministers meetings, and we are launching today a very important report, the report on renewable energy manufacturing opportunities for Southeast Asia. The report is prepared jointly by Bloomberg, by Bloomberg Philanthropies, I should say, Climate Works Foundation, Sustainable Energy for All, and ourselves at the Asian Development Bank. Also benefited from support from the experts at McKinsey, and input from industry and government experts from across the region in Southeast Asia. I'd like to recognize especially the really tight collaboration amongst all ourselves, amongst our institutions in delivering the report and in mobilizing for future partnership in this area. It was really the convergence between the expertise and the resources that reflect our shared commitment to promoting sustainable development and economic transition in ASEAN economies. So today's discussion couldn't be never be more timely. Climate crisis is affecting Southeast Asia, presents enormous risks, but it also holds tremendous opportunities. And unlocking industrial activity in green sectors, both at the ASEAN and at the globally and at the country level, can help deliver low-carbon energy at lower cost and create new sources of economic growth and job creation. In other words, decarbonization really is development. It equals development. This joint report that we're launching today paints a picture of that promise. It describes a potential revenue of 90 to 100 billion US dollars in low-carbon mobility and power technologies, and the potential for millions of jobs in areas such as batteries, two-wheeler vehicles, e-vehicles, and solar panels. The key, or one of the key ingredients in this story, of course, will be proactive and coordinated policy action. And this report that we're launching today outlines some of these actions, both at the national and at the ASEAN regional levels, as well as the collaboration required between governments and industry and development partners and other key stakeholders. But seizing this opportunity also requires aggressive, targeted financial support, and so it's quite fitting that we meet today at the sidelines of this ASEAN finance ministers meetings, where so many aspects of sustainable finance are on the agenda. We at the Asian Development Bank are really honored to join these discussions and to partner in mobilizing finance and expertise for the energy transition. This is really core of our mandate as we are positioning ourselves as the climate bank of Asia and the Pacific. It also motivates our aim to support ASEAN countries seize the enormous opportunities presented in this exciting new report that we're launching today. To conclude, I'd like to extend my sincere thanks to the to the ASEAN Chair, Indonesia, for convening this discussion. And to all of you, all the participants, very warm wishes for a productive and insightful session today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Winfried. Please kindly remind to stay on the stage because we will have a group photo session. Together, we would like to invite again Ms. Mashita Kristalin, our moderator, Ms. Irina Lezerini, and all panelists to join on the stage for photo session together. Okay, you may give the warmer smile. On my count. 1, 2, 3. Okay, once again. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you, Mr. Winfried Wicklin, Ms. Masita Kristalin, our moderator, and all panelists. Kindly return to your seat. Ladies and gentlemen, we are coming to the main session of this seminar, Renewable Energy Manufacturing Opportunities for Southeast Asia. Before we start the session, let me introduce our moderator, Ms. Irina Lezerini. She is a Principal Specialist, Clean Energy and Sustainable Energy for All. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Irina Lezerini.
Thank you very much, MC, and good morning, everyone. Esteemed participants, distinguished guests, it is my privilege to welcome you all to this session that will start with a presentation on Southeast Asia renewable energy manufacturing, a market perspective, followed by then a panel discussion among our distinguished panelists. Our objective today is to delve into the landscape of renewable energy manufacturing in Southeast Asia, looking at potentials, opportunities, but also its many challenges. Allow me to introduce our distinguished presenter for this session. Vishal Agarwal is a senior partner and Asia leader of sustainability at McKinsey & Company and brings a wealth of experience and insights to the table. So without further ado, let's welcome our expert to the podium. Vishal, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Irina. Good morning, everyone. It's really hard to follow Bumasita, Winfried, and Damilola. I firstly wanted to thank Bumasita. The summary of the report that you gave really stole the thunder from this presentation and the panel. It's also very, feels very honored that you, as an advisor to the policymakers for Indonesia and for ASEAN, has gone through and actually absorbed a lot of the content that we actually wanted to bring in front of everyone. So thank you for that. Right. I just wanted to just lay the context of this whole sustainable energy and renewable energy manufacturing in ASEAN as a foundation for what the panel will discuss later on. And this contains some of the core elements of the report that Winfried was talking about. Which has been launched in the collaboration with all the parties that was mentioned. So very quickly, as a summary, if you go to the next page, yes. As as was also mentioned before, there are two ways of looking at this whole energy transition. You could look at it from a risk perspective. Of course, ASEAN is extremely vulnerable, 30% of the GDP at risk. Half of all the climate vulnerabilities is in ASEAN and the broader Asian region. But there's also an opportunity to look at it from a very different perspective on how do we create jobs, the 6 million jobs that Mosita was talking about. How do we actually create more economic development using the energy transition as a theme? And we think there's about 150 to $200 billion worth of additional GDP opportunities that can be created between now and 2030, leveraging the energy transition theme, right? So I'll talk a bit about that. The second part of the presentation really talks about how do you do it, both from the demand side and from the supply side, deep diving on only two of the themes, which is the renewable energy manufacturing and the clean mobility, which accounts for about half of these opportunities that we're talking about. And towards the end, we just wanted to kick this whole panel off by putting out some thoughts on what kind of collaboration is needed across the different stakeholders, because no one agency, no one stakeholder can really make this happen. This will need collaboration from different stakeholders across ASEAN and some outside globally to really achieve these opportunities that we are talking about. So moving on, so this is the broad themes that we have actually looked at, about 10 themes that contribute to about $200 billion worth of opportunity by 2030. And this is not just at a high level. We have actually gone deeper into this, looked at about 66 sectors that actually contribute at a bottom-up level. And half of these, as you can see, is driven by low-carbon mobility, which is electric vehicles, end-to-end, including nickel manufacturing to battery, to cell assembly, to actually the OEMs, two-wheelers and four-wheelers, and clean power, which is the renewable energy, right? And includes all forms of renewable energy, including, as I said, the upstream part of it, which is manufacturing of solar PV. So there's a massive opportunity that can be potentially leveraged using the energy transition as a theme, right? And just to give you some examples today, the whole battery manufacturing is less than 1 gigawatt hour, less than one. The demand from ASEAN alone is 150, right? So that is 1,500 times bigger between now and 2030. And this is just the demand that we are talking about in ASEAN. We think ASEAN can be an export hub on some of these. So that's the scale, that's the magnitude of difference between now and 2030 that we're talking about. Similarly, EV, if you look at the integrated penetration of electric vehicles in the region, is just 1%. This we expect will go up to 30 to 40%. Now, of course, it will be different for two-wheelers versus four-wheelers. It will be different for different countries. But again, that's like about 30 to 40x between now and 2030 that we're talking about. And this cannot be done alone. And this is what we wanted to bring in terms of what kind of collaboration can actually unlock these kind of opportunities. Moving on to the next page. We just wanted to deep dive on the two themes that I was talking about, which is clean mobility and renewable energy. The solar PV, as an example, today, ASEAN is already, as Damilola was talking about, 9% of global supply of solar PV actually comes from ASEAN, which many countries outside don't fully understand, don't fully recognize, right? And in a conservative case, we think this can at least be doubled between now and 2030. Right? And the technical potential is, of course, much higher. Batteries, as I said, today, ASEAN produces less than 0.1 gigawatt hour, can grow 1,500 times between now and 2030, and same on electric vehicles. So that's the overall, from a demand perspective, where we think the opportunities could be. Now, of course, this is not just ASEAN looking at this. Many other regions, many other countries, many other blocks are exactly looking at these opportunities. You see IRA in US trying to actually bring a lot of these manufacturing into United States. I mean, of course, that has an impact on the cost competitiveness of the solar PV, as an example, to countries like Europe and US. Europe is coming up with the CBAM, which is the carbon border adjustment mechanism, which will have implication on the cost again, given the carbon intensity of many of these. So we need to, as ASEAN bloc, we need to always be thinking about what will make us continuously competitive, what will make us export-oriented to these geographies and really capture these opportunities we're talking about. Otherwise, this is not going to materialize. On the next page, this is just another deep dive on the demand side before we move on to the supply. This gives a country within the ASEAN bloc, a country level flavor of where is the demand coming from. If you look at the solar manufacturing or the solar domestic demand itself, of course, Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, Philippines, for example, has mandated now that in the distribution, there has to be a 1% increase every year from the renewable dispatch, right? So these kind of regulations are really coming in more and more to create these demand for the three themes that I was talking about. And many local and international companies are eyeing ASEAN to see how can they actually expand the capacities here. With that, actually, let's get on to the supply side. So this was the demand side outlook. On the next page, we look at what could this result in if all of these supply were to come together. As I said, we actually take a very opportunity-oriented view of what the economic development, what the GDP contribution, what the jobs could be. At an overall level, that we are talking about 5 to 6 million jobs. At an overall level, we are talking about 160 to 200 billion dollars worth of opportunities, right? And at a micro level, if you look at each one of these, just 1 gigawatt solar PV manufacturing capacity, it's 1 gigawatt, is about $50 million. Not insignificant, but not a lot in the context of a country. Results in multiplying factor on GDP, results in about 8,000 jobs, $50 million, 8,000 jobs. Now, of course, some of this is on the upstream side, on the mining, silica, etc. A lot of this is on the manufacturing and the downstream side, but that's the order of magnitude that we're talking about, which we hope we can unlock. On the next page, we're looking at where is the tailwinds and where are the headwinds coming from? What do we need to keep an eye out for to really materialize these opportunities? On the tailwinds, as I said, very exciting to see all the countries actually within the ASEAN bloc having something or the other to provide more tailwind to these themes. I talked about Philippines, but also Indonesia, as Bu Masita said, has been very aggressive in terms of having more renewable in the power plant, has been coming out with the right incentives for battery manufacturing, for more and more solar manufacturing. But there are some headwinds that we need to be cognizant of, and together as a stakeholder group need to figure out how do we address these headwinds, right? For example, there has not been as much investment and thought given into the whole grid or the infrastructure development. We see the implications of that in Vietnam as an example, where there is more and more curtailment. Though 20 gigawatts of solar has been done, but it's not getting dispatched because the infrastructure is not there, right? So thinking about infrastructure end-to-end is super important. We see on the electric vehicle side, though the total cost of ownership actually rationalizes that more and more people should be buying electric vehicles. The penetration should be very high. But the upfront cost the consumer needs to pay upfront is something that is still higher, and what can be done to actually bring that down? What can be done to build more electric charging stations or battery swap stations to really make it happen? So these are some of the things as a headwind that the stakeholder groups will need to address. Very interestingly, on the next page, we actually went out together with the partners who are actually come together for this report as well. We actually went out and interviewed about 20 to 25 suppliers, manufacturers across in the region, across broader Asia, and asked them, what will it take for you to have more manufacturing? What will it take to have more and more economic development in the ASEAN bloc? What's stopping you from investing more, right? And here is what we heard, a few themes. I won't go through each one of these, but a few things that really stood out is, number one, anchor local demand is very important. Unless there is an anchor local demand, the manufacturers are really worried about the risk of just having to rely on the exports. We are seeing this more and more in Cambodia, where most of the demand actually came on the back of exports, but with the IRA, now they're wondering, is it going to be cost competitive or not? So creating that is important. The second thing that we heard was bringing in the right technology partners. Now, as an example, on the battery, the biggest cost contributor to the battery is what kind of yield can you extract from your raw materials. And every percentage point, every 0.1 percentage point has a significant impact on cost. And depending on the right technology and the processes, this can give you anywhere from 30 to 50% difference in the cost. And if you're not bringing the right technologies and you're not enabling the right technologies, it won't help. Right? So that is the second thing that we heard. The third thing that we heard is the costs. As I mentioned, many countries across, many blocks across the world is really looking at this to bring manufacturing within the country. That potentially has the risk of making ASEAN manufacturing less cost competitive. So thinking about what will make ASEAN bloc cost competitive to really build on these opportunities is super important. And number 4 is ease of doing business. Now, different ASEAN countries stand differently on this spectrum, but as an overall bloc, there is a lot that we have heard from these manufacturers, from these investors that need to be done if a lot more money needs to flow and to diversify away from the western part of the world. So these are some of the reflections that we heard that can really help to monetize the opportunities that we were talking about. So that was the supply side. The third part, the last few minutes I want to talk about what are some of the success cases. Of course, there are many that we have tried to learn from, and then what could be the call to action towards the end, right? So on the next page, we have looked at what are some of the interesting success cases on clean mobility and on renewable energy from across the region, right? So for example, solar PV, Malaysia is a terrific example of a success potentially. Now, a part of it is driven by, of course, they also have upstream, they have silica deposits, which makes it easier to do end-to-end. But there is something that they have done to really bring international investors, international companies into the country to really make that as an export hub. Though there is not a lot of local anchor demand. The renewable energy in Malaysia is largely hydro, not solar, right? So it's largely driven by the stakeholders bringing in more and more incentives for these manufacturers to come into Malaysia. It's an interesting success case that I think broader ASEAN bloc can learn from. The second success case that we want to talk about is China. Now, of course, China, the biggest advantage they have is the scale and the local anchor demand. But what they're doing with the whole energy transition, they used to be the quote unquote the fossil fuel manufacturing hub or the cradle of the world for many decades. They are very quickly reinventing in terms of the largest manufacturers of solar PV, largest manufacturers of wind turbines, largest potential manufacturers of batteries. So really bringing in the entire country behind what does it take to optimize for China is something that we can learn from. The third interesting example is India, which does not have a lot of traditional resources in the sense of what is needed for the renewable energy, but they have brought something together to make themselves the third largest renewable capacity after China and after United States, where the solar levelized cost is one of the lowest or one of the least in the world. And they're also bringing the right kind of ecosystem together to drive more and more mobility, right? So these are some of the 3 success cases that we just wanted to put in the spirit of learning from each other and bringing all those learnings to ASEAN. And towards the end, the next page, I just wanted to bring all of these themes together and a take on what we think is needed to really bring this all together. As I said, no one stakeholder, no one agency can really make this happen. And the intent of the report is to really have a call to action from all the relevant stakeholders. From the government, the intent is to really create that ecosystem to have better ease of doing business for renewable energy and for clean mobility, to have the right fiscal incentives and the other incentives to overcome what is called in the financial terms the valley of death, which is the upfront high cost, but overall there's a lot more benefit for the country. and there is a call to action to really bring all the ecosystem, make that ecosystem happen in the country, right? For example, Bu Masita also talked about the whole transition finance. Now, we have heard about a lot of capital getting lined up to invest in these themes. There's a lot of clearly demand, but that pipeline to make that happen is missing, right? So the call to government is to really make these three things happen to enable this transition. The call to the industry and the industry kind of associations is to really bring together the technology that is needed into the private sector, into the public sector for the countries to make this happen and to create kind of more collaboration between the industry associations across ASEAN to make this happen. The call to action for the philanthropies, the NGOs, the manufacturing associations is to really help in upskilling and capability building. Now, of course, as the energy transition comes, on a gross basis, there will be some jobs that might be at risk, but on a net basis, as I said, there is about 5 to 6 million jobs net that will be created. But this will need some upskilling, this will need some retraining, and that's the call to action to really create that supply base of talent. And the call to action for the international multilateral funding organizations is to really help create those innovative transition finance structures. Is to really figure out the right kind of instruments to underwrite those unknown risks in some of these new topics and new industries to really allow that flow of capital, right? So that's broadly the intent of the report to really bring the different stakeholders to call to action. With that, I'll conclude the opening remarks and hand over back to you, Rina, for the panel discussion. Thank you, everyone.
Many thanks, Vishal, for the insightful and really engaging presentation. We talk about revenue opportunities, especially in the low-carbon mobility, but also in the clean power sector in Southeast Asia by 2030. And you, Vishal, also touch upon, of course, the challenges in solar PV and how we can overcome them to the right regulatory framework, the right business environment in place. And we will now continue this very engaging discussion with our panelists that I'm going to invite to join us here on the stage, and they will provide their diverse perspective and commentary on the key findings of the report. Please join me in welcome on the stage Mr. Ray Luo, Director for Asia Pacific Environment and Climate Program at Bloomberg Philanthropies. Please, Ray. Mr. Scott Roberts, Head, Southeast Asia Green Finance Unit at ADB, the Asian Development Bank. Ms. Valérie Juyan, the UN Resident Coordinator for Indonesia. Mr. Kiki Verico, Advisor to the Minister of Finance for Industry and International Trade. Mr. Salil Dut, Chief Technical Advisor at the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO. Mr. Jaya Vahono, Deputy Chair for SMEs at Kadin, Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And Ms. Chen Yi, Associate Director, Climate Works Foundation. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us on stage. I think we are missing one speaker, probably delayed. But we will start with our panel discussion. We're going to have a session of about 40 minutes where we are going to go into the key findings of the report and leave space for all our panelists to provide some commentary. After this session, I'm going to open the floor for some questions from the audience, and then we're going to wrap up the session for the day. Let me start with the very first question to you, Ray. First of all, many thanks for joining us. We discussed about solar PV, both in the introduction from the key panelists and also in the presentation from Vishal. We understand that this is a major area of work for Southeast Asia where there are a lot of opportunities. But can the region leverage its strengths to meet the demand for both domestic purpose and also for export?
Thanks, Serena. Hello, morning, everyone. Great to be here. I think back to Indonesia so many times. This is really grateful for Ibu Masita hosting this very important topic during this ministerial meeting. Thanks ADB and SE4O, Climeworks Foundation, and also our knowledge partner from McKinsey and other colleagues through the process. If I may just step out a little bit, so the climate philanthropy, like Bloomberg Philanthropy, why we are just part of this consortium to highlight the renewable energy manufacture in Southeast Asia. Say, hypothetically, if it's industry, natural development, probably that's less of philanthropy engagement. But because of the climate change, I think so many speakers talk about, and also the deployment of renewable energy is substantial by 2030. And also that creates a lot of production demand of the renewable energy manufacture. So I think there's a big gap, how fast and what's the scale that could be for this renewable energy deployment, also associated with manufacture. So that's where the philanthropy would like to address. The scaling of the manufacture is for the climate purpose. And the second is also the development, the economic development. So people talk about job and also the just transition. I think this is a concrete example that addressing both industry, economic development, energy, and climate issue altogether. And lastly, if people already working together, probably we are not here anymore. So we see there's people acting by themselves, or a country have their own strategy, haven't leveraged so much of the regional or international resources and advantage. I think that's the sort of multi-stakeholder conversation a lot of speakers talk about early on. So that is why we are here for Bloomberg Philanthropy. But back to your question, Irina, in terms of current strengths of the solar manufacturing in this region. As Vasha already mentioned, the production is already substantial, 10% in module and cells, but also driven by exporting. I think that's fine in the past because that's already responding to demand. But now if this is going towards scaling up, I think the region and the individual country here need to have a different strategy. You call it country, industry strategy or energy strategy. I think that's also intentionally to deploy and design your manufacture development in solar sector. So I think that the path of the manufacture of a cell and module already have some foundation of workforces, skills, and also some level of industrial ecosystem in certain countries. I think that's the strengths. And second, I think this region is really adaptive. Either you're domestic, there's some certain country come up the national plan to deploy solar. I think the developers and company reacting quickly to install solar quickly, and also responding to exporting demand. I think the agile and flexibility is something I think ingrained in this region for the country and the company in here to celebrate. And lastly, it's about the resource. I think a few countries has mineral resources, and so that's also advantage. So I think overall, those are so fundamental where we can see. But next step, as the report already lay out, there needs the better coordination and collaboration across country and also industry to see where you can take advantage or competitive advantage to design the supply chain and the manufacturer capability across the region. And also the second is because of the workforce skill in certain country already has some certain level, but it's not to the level that we need the demand of the manufacturer production. So I think there's more of the training, skill sharing across country or within the country need to be better designed, and also with the support from government and the industry and also the NGO and the experts. And lastly, I think the infrastructure, both soft, which you touch upon skill, but the harder one, I think the logistics. Some country have, some country are less of. Also that talk about this regional aspects. Maybe I end here by asking a question, is it a good approach for this region, really look at the regional manufacturer perspective rather than the individual country manufacturer strategy? So I stop here. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Ray. Very, very interesting, your remarks, and good that you also touch upon the importance of workforce beyond everything else, because this is also the key. Thank you for that. And we go now to our second panelist, Scott. We will discuss now a bit about intra-regional collaboration that is highlighted in our report as a key strategy to become more competitive and to meet net zero targets. Could you maybe provide some examples of how this regional collaboration can be achieved across the value chain?
Thank you, Irina. Let me start by just saying what a pleasure it is to be here and to work with our consortium partners in delivering this report. The question that you raised and the one that Ray just asked, I think is very important to us as a regional institution. The Asian Development Bank works very closely with ASEAN and with member countries to try to promote climate change objectives and economic development objectives, and to have both of them come together in one topic at an area of enormous economic opportunity is one that we think is important for industries to seize, for countries to seize, and for the region to seize. That regional perspective we think is particularly important. Yes, this is a call to action for firms and for industries to work together at national level. And a lot of the material in the report is looking at that. The case studies that we've seen, India, Malaysia, People's Republic of China, all of these are industries that have been really driving at a national level. But for ASEAN, this is a particular feature of this region. 1/3 of automotive exports from ASEAN countries are to other ASEAN countries. And as value chains emerge from scratch, we have the beginning to have complementary value chains begin to take shape. That could be, for example, battery exports taking the form of cells being exported from Indonesia, or cathodes from the Philippines to other countries in the region that might be involved in the assembly part of the value chain. Being able to think about this on a regional perspective allows us, we believe, with ASEAN guidance, to create integrated and complementary value chains to merge. But it's not just a trade story. I think there are other sort of non-economic but equally important aspects to collaboration. One of the things that Vishal mentioned in the presentation was the need to upgrade skills, to high-grade the labor force so that people can transition into these jobs with new technical requirements. That actually is something that ASEAN institutions can support at a regional level. Knowledge sharing, capacity development, technical and vocational strategies at that regional level. So that's one. Another that we think is very important, it's highlighted in the report, is emerging grid infrastructure. The ASEAN region has a complementarity of both demand and supply that can be unlocked with regional grid infrastructure. And the emergence of an ASEAN power grid might create a bit of an engine on the demand side that could be important, with spillover effects for domestically produced manufacturing. And maybe the last one I'll just mention is standards. And standards is something that typically is attacked at the national level. And we've seen industry associations begin to rise up and look for ways in which harmonized standards can allow for more, let's say, exchange or for trade. At the regional level, there's an opportunity for that as well. Again, at the national level, you can see things like battery swapping beginning to be promoted as something that could be OEM agnostic. But thinking about that in terms of harmonization of standards, at the ASEAN level, we believe could be another motivating force. We've seen that in capital market standardization, sustainable finance taxonomy. This could be another area where regional bodies can begin to provide an ASEAN answer to standards, if this is really supposed to be a center of gravity for production globally. So I think it's fitting that this is happening in the ASEAN finance minister meeting sideline. Of course, as a regional body ourselves, ADB is very, very engaged in thinking about this in a sort of complementary and coordinated way.
Thank you very much. And important also you mentioned skills as a key priority, infrastructure, of course, and standards that emerge also from some of the discussion we had in the past days. Thank you, Scott. And now going from intra-regional collaboration to international collaboration, Valerie, international collaboration is also very important for ASEAN, for the whole region. But how can policymakers, industry players active in the region, and international organizations like ours actively contribute actually to scale up renewable energy manufacturing, but still considering sustainability as a key priority?
Thank you very much, Irina, and my greetings to all of you here. I'm very pleased to be part of this panel, and I think it's an important discussion. I just want to, from the get-go, to remind all of us The reason why we're discussing about this is because we have today over us a crisis that is the most essential one that the world has faced, which is the climate change crisis. And I must say, climate change is a reality. The Secretary General is talking about this all the time. And it's something that we tend to forget, that this is the best example of man-made disaster. It's not a force that has come to destroy the planet. We did. So I think we should never forget that in whatever endeavor we have now, when we try to fix it, so that we don't make the same mistakes as we have done so far. So what it means is that energy transition is not only an option, it's a must. We have to take that transition, because otherwise that's ourselves will be finished, the planet will be finished, humanity will be finished. But what it means is that we need energy transition because we need energy. And therefore, it means that we need to continue to produce energy. And for one reason only. It's not that we absolutely need it. It's the lifestyle that we have chosen for us human means that we need energy. Because otherwise, look at this very nice setup with animals and the planet. And humans used to live in an environment like this where they didn't need energy. But just we have opted, we have decided for a lifestyle that requires energy. So therefore, we need to produce it. So now the next question is therefore, is energy production necessarily damaging for environment, for the planet, for people? And my answer is yes. If we don't change our mindset, if we don't change our approach. That's very clear. We can do a lot of renewable energy, but if we don't change the fundamentals on how we approach that, we're going to have the exact same results. And the report actually signals that as well. So what we need to do, it's a number of issues that I would like to bring here. And of course, it's expected from me also because I'm United Nations. And as United Nations, our main focus will be on the people and the planet. But first, what I want to say is that we need to change our current mindset, because our mindset is one where economy dominates everything else. Economy dominates environment, economy dominates the social, economy has become the god. And I'm very sorry to say, and certainly I'm going a bit against the mainstream here, but economy is not a god. And we therefore need to rebalance the stakes. Environment, economy, social, politics. There is not one that is more important than the other. And if we don't want to perpetuate the mistakes we have done until now, we need to rebalance those stakes and consider that all of those aspects are equally important. So energy transition actually needs to consider the environmental dimension, the social dimension, not only the economical and production of energy dimension. And if we put that first again, as I say, we're going to go into the wall. So how do we rebalance that? Well, also contrary maybe to many things that are being promoted these days, I would say, we need to rebalance the public-private powers. We need stronger government. We need states that take on the responsibility to design the laws and the policies that will protect the people and the planet. For as long as we have too often the economic dimension that dominates, it means that private sector, and not private sector as an evil, but private sector as an approach to economy and income generating will dominate the debate. And once again, this cannot dominate the debate. We need the environment and the social dimension to be there equally. And why do I put an emphasis on governments? Because governments are the ones that elaborate the laws and the policies. And then that's also government that needs to put in place the justice system that will make sure that the laws and the policies are implemented. And we need a strong justice system to make sure that energy transition is just. Because a strong justice system will stop corruption. A strong justice system will make sure that what needs to be respected is respected. The other element we need is the respect and the implementation to the international norms and standards. Those have been elaborated by the United Nations and many others. But what it means when we say by the United Nations, it means by all the member states of the United Nations. And you have norms and standards on environment, on social dimension, for the protection of the planet, to stop corruption. All those norms actually are the ones that should set the north. They have been approved by all the member states of the United Nations for the good of humanity. And those norms are the ones that should be the north. Nothing else. This is where the just dimension comes into play. We talk about energy transition, and of course we talk about just energy transition. But the just cannot be a decoration and a nice word in a nice rhetoric. It has to be implemented fully and by everybody. Because if we don't do that, as I said initially, no matter what the energy source is, it can destroy humanity the same way as fossil fuel has been doing. The just transition will enable the new energies to be done in a way that they respect the environment and respect the people. The report, I highlight that with the production today of energy, for instance, of batteries with nickel, if we don't give the proper attention to environment and people, well, nickel will as well contribute to land degradation, to deforestation, to conflict between communities. So at the end of the day, it won't be necessarily much better. So we will have the pleasure to say, oh, we have an energy that is not producing so much carbon, yes, but it's producing as much problems and maybe carbons ultimately than the others. And the last point that I want to raise, and I'll be finishing with that, is that we need, and this has been said by other speakers before me, a strong collaboration and coordination amongst all actors. This has been repeated by many. Nothing can be achieved with one stakeholder only, with one actor only. We need all the actors, but we need a strong coordination among them so that we can make sure as well that we can learn from each other and we can respect each other's role. And in that sense, civil society has an important role, as well as government, as well as private sector, as well as international organization, because we all can contribute some aspects. And we can all also contribute to the co-financing, which is also another element. So that's it. This is what I wanted to mention. I think this is the way we can contribute, and this is what we should focus on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valerie. As a reminder for all of us of the importance of considering environment and social aspect, very relevant, and also not to focus only on the economical aspect, but in all the different aspects that you brought on the table. Many thanks for your intervention. And also important enough to change mindset. That's the key. Going to the next panelist, Pak Kiki.
Yep.
Obviously, there are risks and challenges when it comes to rapid scale-up of renewable energy manufacturing. Valerie just mentioned some of them, of course, the importance to ESG, to the social aspects, and many more. How can these risks be mitigated, in your opinion, in Indonesia, but also at large in Southeast Asia? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the questions. Thank you for having me. Let me start with the fact that in Southeast Asian countries, most developing countries, emerging countries, and FDI recipient. So in the production network, these regions is actually part of the global or regional production network. So as the developing countries, they are relying on manufacturing sector. So manufacturing is the backbone of the economy in Southeast Asia. And then they are emerging. That means their average economic growth is above the global economic growth. That means they are the puller of the economic growth. That means if Southeast Asia, create more economic growth, then it's create more impact to the global economic growth. But that through manufacturing sector, that means create more demand on energy and more emissions. So how to manage this? We have to change, like previous speaker said, mindset, state of mind. The way they look at the renewable energy or emissions cap is from the cost side. That means it will increase the cost of productions. But the way we need to see is not the cost of productions, but we need to see from the revenue side. You know, from now in the future, it's a pointless if you produce the product, if you ignore the environments, because you cannot export your product outside, because outside countries, advanced countries, will put the climate change sensitivity, green economy, environment friendly as a part of barriers to enter the markets, so non-tariff measurements. So if you look at from that, yes, energy transitions from unrenewable to renewable, like photovoltaic cells, is expensive. Reducing emission is expensive. But if you look at from the perspective of revenue, it's pointless to not or ignore them because you cannot sell your product. So you have to see from the profit perspective that you need to make sure that your product can sell outside. And this is not the responsibility of the recipient of the FDI countries in Southeast Asia, but also the FDI donor, which is coming from the advanced countries. So it is a commitment that mutually involving developed and developing countries to have a production network, you know, and to have a green production network. So I agree with this report in the first page on introduction, saying that if Southeast Asian countries do not commit to the climate change, then they will experience a decreasing GDP up to 30% by 2050. This is a very strong message that you need to catch up with the green economy and then the environment friendly, ESG and so on. Because not only you will experience the GDP side, because maybe your product cannot be accepted or banned from other countries, but also you cannot attract FDI inflows, another FDI inflows, and investment inflows, even short-run inflows from banking and non-banking channels, because they will look at you, whether you are green, commit on or not. And this must be realized, aware by all Southeast Asian countries. Why? Because production network. Because these are production network, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, they are all together producing, manufacturing with the investment from outside of Southeast Asia. So the key is government intervention at the global, at the regional especially, intergovernmental in ASEAN. Have to realize this. And then if you look at this from the ASEAN plan of action, there are ASEAN power grid, ASEAN trans gas pipeline, coal, clean energy, efficient energy, energy mix, and also installed power capacity. It is a certain of renewable energy must be used, to reduce the dependency on the primary like fossil fuel or coal energy, and not to mention another factors like last but not least. The clean energy for using the nuclear that mentioned by the ASEAN. So all these 7 mitigations that the ASEAN would like to, as a plan of action, that we have to make sure this is not only a plan, but also implemented. And then we have to change our minds, not only to look at environment as a cost, but it's also as a profit, as a revenue side that will influence our markets. Mechanisms, and that need government intervention to internalize the externalities. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Pak Kiki, for your intervention, which also follow up to what Valerie was saying, the importance of manufacturing to be green and to really be green, also to attract even more investment and not to have barrier in the markets, in the region at a global level as well. We go to the next panelist. Salil, it's now your turn. Our report suggests that vertical integration, production at scale, and operational excellence, so these 3 elements, are the key success factor for battery manufacturing. And in your experience in the manufacturing sector with UNIDO, do you think, first of all, these 3 factors are really important, and can these factors be effectively implemented here in Southeast Asia?
Thank you very much, Irina, for the question. And I'm honored to be on the panel of this launch of this report. I could make some notes while people were talking in the opening session, and when Vishal was also presenting. Yes, vertical integration is very important because that will ensure the availability of raw material at a reasonable price. And that will also solve a lot of logistics related issues. So many of the major players like POSCO, LG, who are trying to invest into Southeast Asia are looking for vertical integration, not only in battery manufacturing, but this is true for any other sector. Vertical integration is important and make a whole manufacturing process very cost effective. Second is scale of operation. Yes, if you are producing very less quantity of batteries, you will be having a lot of inefficiencies in the process. So economy of scale will always provide a better landscape for your revenues and profitability. That we have learned from many countries who are able to scale up their production lines for the benefit of economy. But having said that, these two are not enough. Operational excellence is also very important because that will ensure that you are manufacturing the quality products which are accepted by the consumers, and you are improving every time, like Kaizen. Your processes, your logistics, your supply chain is improved every time. In addition to these three, I would also like to emphasize on that optimizing supply chain is also very important. Because once supply chain is ensured, your raw material is there, sometimes there will be less demand and you might have to have some inventorization of products so that your production is not suffering because of supply chain. So that is also very important. The overall ecosystem, Vishal mentioned in his presentation, if there is some anchor, manufacturer, that plays a very important role. In Indonesia, we have seen in many of the industrial parks, we have anchor tenants. So anchor tenants are very, driving the whole manufacturing of that particular product. And in this case of Southeast Asia, I think nickel, manganese, and cobalt battery manufacturing plays an important role where resources are available. Taking some clue from what Valerie said, I think we also need to think, we always focus on where the resources are. However, as Vishal also mentioned, India, who is not having a lot of resources for solar, but they were able to create some business model with the companies which ensured the penetration of solar energy in India. So not necessarily resource is important. It is also how the whole ecosystem and business model is built in the country which will support manufacturing. While resource is important to start with, we also need to think about how circular we will be. Because otherwise, this nickel resource, 21% of nickel in Indonesia, will become another fossil. We will keep mining nickel and producing batteries, keep supplying to US and Europe, where so we need to have some extended producer responsibility, EPR, in battery manufacturing, so that the nickel is again recycled and reused. So in short term, or let's say in medium or long term, we are not depending on nickel mining anymore. We should be depending only on nickel recycling to continuously meet the demand of the, our energy. Partnership will also play a very important role. Like for the good consumers, if long-term partnership agreements are signed by the manufacturers, that will also improve a lot of competitiveness and excellence in the whole system. Thank you very much. This is a brief input from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Salil. Very important that you mentioned that a country doesn't have to have a lot of resources, but a very good business model in place. But even more important, your point on the circularity of resources, right? We cannot just dig. We really have to create a system where we use, recycle, and this is very important, also for country with a lot of resources. So thank you for mentioning that. And we're now going to Chenyi. And we would like to discuss a bit back about solar PV, Because while it is true that there is a lot of potential in the region, it's also true that there are some challenges in less established markets when it comes to solar photovoltaic. What kind of specific strategies or improvements in the business environment, in the local supply chain, would you suggest that need to be implemented to kind of face these barriers?
Yes, thank you, Irina. Thank you for having me here. It's my great honor to be here, and also very important for Climate Works to contribute to this very great report, this research to show the potential of ASEAN countries and the elements needed and the pathway forward to accelerate its clean energy transition. And back to your question, first, I think for national strategies, there need to be strategic alignment among different levels, the national level, sectoral level, and subnational level. As we all know that most ASEAN countries has bring forward quite ambitious NDC target and a net zero transition target. But I think there need to be some breakdown of this national target to subnational target and also sectoral target. So to make some clear signals, like including the breakdown targets for energy transition, what is needed for solar and wind and battery and else to scale up. This will provide a very good signal for the whole market and also the producers that that is a goal that need to achieve like at some kind of time point. This is first. And also with that target, also a very quite detailed implementation is also needed. A lot of panelists has mentioned like the infrastructure needed, the logics needed, logistical needed, and I think there should be an overall consideration of how to achieve that target with a quite detailed implementation plan to follow with that. Second, I think supporting policies, especially at the early stage of this building up these manufacturing supply chains with other countries is so very important. These policies should be consistent and also easy to follow for manufacturers, especially investment coming from outside of this region. For some other countries that this report just has mentioned, like including China, Thailand, they probably have this kind of one-stop shop service. It's very important for, the easy coming of the outside investment. And we also should bear in mind that for the first movers, especially at the earliest stage, to build up like the solar supply chain or battery supply chains, it's quite hard for them. So there should be some incentives for these early movers to encourage this kind of exploration, to encourage entrepreneurship at this kind of stage. The third one, talking about talents. This is also very important. Even in China, the talents, there are so many demands for the talent, and it's short of supply. So I think for other countries, it's the same. So it's quite important to build, to use this industry academia partnership because like they can work together to tailor some curriculums or other kind of project to kind of scale up these talent skills needed and tailored for this manufacturing within other countries. The fourth one, I think, just like other panelists has mentioned, we really need to be open to collaboration. Government to government, industry to industry, private sector. And it's very important to keep open and talk to each other and to learn, especially what this kind of producers needs, the manufacturers needs. And the final one, talking about supply chain, it's a simple way, logical way to start with the easiest. The sector within the supply chain. But we should also bear in mind we should have the longer vision that how to build up this integrated end-to-end supply chain. Although right now we just start from the most simple one. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chenny. Very important to have the right business environment, the right system in place, incentives, but also, as you mentioned, collaboration, especially for early movers. This is also very important. And then talent, again, this is emerging. Skills, talent, knowledge, people. Thank you very much. So with these, I think we still have some times, and I would like now to open the floor for questions from the audience. If you want to pose a question, I will kindly ask you to please state your name, your organization, and also indicate to who you want to pose the question among our panelists. So I hope someone will help us to collect the questions. I think we have time for 3-4 questions. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Putri Mardia from Ministry of Finance, Republic of Indonesia. Yesterday, I came from the airport to this venue by a taxi, which is Hyundai Ioniq, an electric vehicle. It's amazing because no pollution and low cost. We don't need to buy fuel oil anymore. I hope that I can buy one. But the price of electric vehicle is still very expensive for me. It's about 700 million rupiahs. And my question is, do you believe that if the government, industry, funding organization work together to support this renewable energy manufacturing, the electric vehicle in the future can be cheaper and can be bought by everyone in Southeast Asia up to the middle class? And how many years needed to achieve that goal? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Looking at the panelists who want to take it. Go ahead, Scott, thanks.
Maybe just a first response from me, Renata. I think that's a great question. We've talked about many ways in which we can kind of catalyze these industries, but actually one area that we haven't talked too much about is the financing part. I think, coming from an organization that has the word bank in its title, I think it would be remiss of me if I didn't mention something about this, since it's a great question on subsidies. Subsidies play a varied role depending on how they're applied. They can change mindsets of consumers, and that's very often the entry point for subsidizing the purchase of these technologies. But they're also important throughout the value chain. And one of the things that would be important from our perspective to really accelerate these industries is making sure that subsidies are well designed, well financed, well implemented, and that there is a sort of learning effect that these can be phased in and out depending on the needs of the sector. From our perspective, this is going to be very much a national issue. Local conditions will vary from country to country. But what's important for us to recognize is that very often these are spillover or kind of revolving impacts. If you put up a 10 gigawatt hour production facility for batteries, that requires about $1 billion of capex, right? That's an awful lot, and that would necessarily require some sort of financial support. But each year that it is operating, it's roughly half of that per year in GDP impact. And the jobs that it creates, as we've seen from Vishal's presentation, about 40,000 jobs in the construction phase, but then 40,000 jobs each year of production. And one of the things that we haven't had the opportunity today to talk about is all the detail behind this summary report, is looking at those impacts at the construction phase, the suppliers that go into that construction, the tier 2 suppliers, and then of course all the spillover effects with people who are employed, the economy, and the sort of activity purchasing power that enables. So I think one of the lessons that we've drawn as an institution participating in this research is the enormous magnifying power, mobilizing power of very, very well-targeted investments and support from the government and from financing partners such as ADB.
Thank you, Scott. Please, Salil.
Thank you very much for this question. Very relevant. But I'm so happy that at least Ionic is now available from airport to your place. Few years back, that was not the situation. Scale of operation, as also discussed, is very important to bring down the costs. So if the demand is more, they will produce more, and they will produce more competitively. That is also another dimension of bringing down the cost, in addition to government subsidies and other financial instruments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please, Pak Kiko.
Okay, so we are in the economy state overshoot situations. So two new words that we are transforming now. First, digital. Second, environment. From digital, digital technology, everyone moved from, non-conventional to digital. That creates, adjustments. It creates, technology adjustment from the consumer as well, and from the supply side and the consumer, and environment as well. Same like that. If you are talking about battery, there are two, at least, technology now developing. One is nickel, mangan, cobalt, and the other is lithium, iron, phosphate. This technology is still there, and then they are still creating, a supply. And the economy, we understand that either demand creates its own supply or supply creates its own demand. Now we are in the era is supply creates its own demand. So the world is now moving to non-conventional, or we can say brown energy, to the green energy, to non-battery, to battery, to non-photovoltaic, to photovoltaic, to non-solar, to solar panel. So that's the technology is still there and going there. So we have to be patient, because 30 to 40% the cost of electric vehicles is battery. So when the technology in battery and MC or LFV, when they get more advanced, they will reduce the cost of production, and they achieve the economies of scale. I believe the cost, the price of the electric vehicles will reduce. And then at the same time, we need to transform the consumer to use the cars or mobiles, vehicles, from non-electric to electric vehicles. That's the process to getting familiar with that kind. But I believe that the world is now moving to that kind of path. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Kiki. Please, Chani.
Yeah, I just would like to use my own experience to demonstrate that it's possible, because we bought two electrical vehicles back in China. One is in 2014, which for that car we got subsidies from the government. But when we buy the second one just last year, the subsidies has decreased a lot. Because the technology advances very fast, and China is aspiring to phase out the subsidy in the next 1 or 2 years. So first, technology advances. Second, I also believe that there should be some incentives to building up this kind of demand, but there should be an overall consideration of how to use subsidies to build up this demand within different sectors. EV is one, also solar and others. So, like an overall vision and the consideration and breakdown, because the subsidies is the resource is very valuable. It's important for the national government, the local government to think about it, how to best use this kind of resources and how to leverage its resource endowments and also funding from others like MDBs to scale up this kind of domestic demand. And according to analysis from both domestic and BNF, the price of EV will be equal to the ICE cars within 3 or 4 years. So I think it's highly impossible in the next few years that Indonesia can duplicate the successful stories of others. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Shani. Very good example, and reminding us that incentives are very important at the beginning, but they also need to be phased out when technology is there and innovation is driving down the price naturally. Thank you so much. And of course, what we discussed, it's also valid for electric two-wheelers. We were focusing very much on four-wheelers, but this is exactly important also for electric two-wheelers, which is one of the key elements that we discuss and we look into the report. Thank you so much. So going back to the audience, please don't be shy. We still have 12 minutes and we can take some more questions from the audience. I see that there are 2 questions, so ladies first. Give the floor to her and then to you. Thank you.
Work at Ministry of Finance in the region of Central Borneo. I worked there more than 5 years from East Borneo, and in the last 2 years I worked at Central Borneo. And I saw 2 days ago, I flight from Palangkaraya to Jakarta, and I saw in the first time in the 3 years, I saw so many smoke of the forest fires in the Borneo. So I wish that the government and all of you make help for Borneo from forest fires. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will take this question. Maybe we can take the second question as well, and then...
Check. My great honors to all participants and all the panelists here. My name is Romi Ramadhani. I'm coming from private sector. My company is Triniton Green Energy Metals, mainly focused on the mining and technology process, especially for nickel and cobalt extraction, particularly to support the nickel class 1 market industry. So my interesting thought mentioned by Mr. Salil that regarding the nickel and its exporting industries and also the recycling process, and I think that would be a great insight, because I also refer to the Mr. Fisal presentation previously that saying, given the fact that we have abundant nickel resources in Indonesia, but the fact is there is a very limited technology that able to process. And one of the things that the company who can process is very limited, and one of the proven technology now being processed back to 2021 with a many downside, if I might saying, with much of carbon emission, how to manage the residue or the tailing. And moreover, if we talk about the geopolitical bifurcation, most likely would not comply with IRA. And my question is, seeing this as the opportunity and challenge in Indonesia, what is your macro perspective for the private sector to support the nickel class 1 industry and to support the energy transition for many years to come? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. So we have 2 questions. Maybe I will suggest for the first one, Valerie, do you want to take it? The importance of taking into account what's happening in Borneo, the fires, the environmental, it's very much linked to what we were discussing before.
Thank you, and thank you for this question. I think it stems to what, it links to exactly what I was saying. We need to change the mindset. Whether we want to produce this or that, if our starting point is not that the environment must be respected, and must be respected for itself, not only for what it brings us. The big problem of humanity, it is that it looks upon the natural resources as a resource, and not as an entity that has the same right to exist on this planet than we. So actually, if we want, for instance, to produce more nickel batteries in Kalimantan, but in the process of doing that, we deforest, we cut all the trees, we seize the land of indigenous population without respecting their rights, well, we haven't changed anything. So I think that your question is right, is that we are today in that era where we talk about renewable energy, respecting environment, but we haven't changed the way we do it. So for me, it just ties with what I was saying earlier on. If we don't change the mindset that human beings on this planet have rights to exist, but equally has the environment, the trees, the ocean. You see, there is this whole discussion, for instance, on the blue agenda and saving the ocean. But funnily, we look at the ocean only as a way to get money out of it. And that we must make sure that we produce sustainably and we fish sustainably. But why do we look upon what exists on this planet only as a source of income? Mostly because we think as humans that we have supremacy and rights over everything. But the big reality that we need to face as humans is that we need the planet to live. We need the animals to live. We need the trees and the flowers to live. But you know what? The flowers, the trees, the planet, and the animals, they don't need us to exist. So this should be enough realization that we don't have all the rights on the planet to take whatever we like. And this, I mean, I know that when I speak like this, people say, oh, Valerie, she's an activist. Yes, I'm an activist in the sense that if we don't change, once again, the mindset, the same cause will have the same effect. So thank you for raising that.
Thank you so much, Valerie. And linked to this, and also to the question of the panelists about the nickel and the challenges in nickel, I understand that you want to do things sustainably, but there are several challenges, right? And you ask for support. Who want to take these questions? How we can support nickel production to be more sustainable? Yes, please, Paki.
Okay, if you look at the data of nickel explorations in Indonesia, from raw materials to intermediate, you can see that there is a good in terms of production side. I have indicators of location quotient and shift share. That's good in Kalimantan. But if you look at more downstream to the intermediate and final products, the productivity dropped quite significant. And if you look at from the HS, for instance, pyrometallurgy, hydrometallurgy, battery chain, stainless steel chain 1, stainless steel chain 2, and battery chain, then you can see that it's clear. The more you go down, the more productivity down, the more less technology that we have, the productivity. So what does it mean? It's a stick and carrot. If Indonesia want to move the downstreaming from the raw materials to intermediate to final product to battery chain, that need another investment coming from other countries. And this investment asking for a strict commitment on the climate, a strict commitment to the environment. So if they don't want to come to Indonesia. If you produce, explore your nickel, neglect the climate change, neglect the environment, neglect the green economy, then no one will come to Indonesia, and your downstreaming will stop. So that's a market mechanism. Another, of course, from the government intervention to make sure the tailing, to make sure the emission, to make sure all the emissions, to make sure the energy that you use is clean. Otherwise, yeah, what's the point to generate the nickel-based product? That's from my side.
Thank you very much. Prisalil, I wanted to ask you to intervene as well. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this question. Private sector has to play a critical role. I'm coming from United Nations Industrial Development Organization, so I can also say this because technology and innovation is the key. And then you need to continue finding solutions for the problem, especially for this battery. So you need to have mining, then refining, then cell manufacturing, or let's say cathode manufacturing, cell manufacturing, and then battery pack, and then, finished. When we mine, what are we solving actually? Mining and refining, right? Is a little easier than if you go for recycling process. So please understand, business as usual, when you keep mining things and producing things, is not sustainable. So sooner or later, private sector will realize that there is not enough nickel at a competitive price available to support the remaining processes for the batteries. And that's where the recycling comes into picture. Today, it may not be competitive, but tomorrow it will be. We should also learn from what we did from plastic. We started manufacturing plastic everywhere, and in our oceans, there's a lot of plastic already. So we now are saying that we should not go for single-use plastic. We should recycle plastic. Same with paper. We cut forest, we produce paper, and then we are looking for recycling the paper. So let us not do this for this battery. So try to have some ecosystem where negative externalities, as Pakiki also mentioned, are to be taken care of from the beginning, so that the whole production process is sustainable. And private sector definitely plays a very important role in this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Looking at the panelists, if someone wants to add something? Not the case. Okay, before wrapping up our session, I would like to ask each of you, please, to provide a key takeaway to the audience. One key success factor that, according to you, it's very important when it comes to support renewable energy manufacturing in the region. Just one in one very short sentence, starting from you, Ray, and then going this direction.
Thanks so much. It's a quite challenging question, even just one sentence. I would like to say, first, after this session, I think collectively we are definitely wiser than we joined this session before, because we touch upon different aspects of the renewable energy manufacturing, not only from market industry perspective, actually from ecological environment and the social aspects. So if I just leave one sort of important factor starting off is we need to have a foresight of the holistic national or regional sectoral policy on manufacture, coupled with training and knowledge and infrastructure and the ecological mindset. So that's my takeaway by learning from the audience and the panelists. Thanks.
Sharing Ray's appreciation to the panel and to the collaboration that got us here with the work with industry and amongst us partners in creating this report and the work that we'd like to do together going forward. That's one sentence. Maybe one other sentence. One takeaway that I've had from this discussion is the importance of coordination. Ecosystems, markets, they can be self-governing to some extent, but what we're really looking for, I think, in this report is bringing together some lessons from other markets, ways in which we can accelerate that transition so that money is well spent on the CapEx, money is there to support on training and standards and coordination, and that there is governance to make sure that we get the most efficient outcomes for climate benefits, for GDP, for jobs.
Well, my main takeaway will certainly be my main message is that we need to rebalance the powers and rebalance the stakes and consider that people and planet are as important as prosperity.
Okay, there are two factors in developments. One, exogenous factors. Another is endogenous factors. Exogenous factors is sufficient condition. What are the exogenous factors? Infrastructures and manufacturers. What are endogenous as necessary conditions? Human and environments. That's not human-made. Exogenous is human-made. Endogenous is not human-made. So you have to respect the not human-made first, nature, and then human health. So put that as a necessary conditions in every step that you take in your manufacturing, in your development, in anything you do, your activities, because human and nature are not created by human. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One takeaway which I can say that we all are in this room together and then we intend to move forward. Only thing is jointly we need to paint the picture of how we would look like maybe after 10 years and keep doing our role in an efficient way so that we can use the resources sustainably in the future. Thank you very much.
Well, I think manufacturing is very important for the sustainable development of ASEAN countries. It calls for collective efforts, both from top down and bottom up, from all the key stakeholders, including government, industry, private sector, and even everyone in ASEAN countries to do it in a sustainable, transparent, respectful way to our nature. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all the panelists. I hope the audience, you all took note because these were great takeaways. Please join me for a round of applause to our panelists. And as we come to an end, I would like to first of all thank all the organizers, the ASEAN Secretariat, the Ministry of Finance that really supported us. And of course, I would like to thank our partners, the Asian Development Bank, Bloomberg Philanthropies, Climate Work Foundation. I would like to thank all the panelists for their engaging insights and for the great discussion we had today. And before closing, please, I would like to remind all of you that the report is available for free on our website, on all the partners' website, but also you can just download the report here from the QR code, scanning it, and it will be on your mailbox in a matter of seconds. So thank you very much to all of you. I will now close the session and give back the floor to our MC. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Once again, please give big applause for our moderator and all panelists. Thank you, Ms. Irina Lezrini, for moderating the session, and also our panelists for insightful discussion. Moderator and all panelists, you may return to your seat. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we now come to the end of seminar on renewable energy manufacturing opportunities for Southeast Asia. Before we leave this agenda, please fill out the feedback form shown on the screen, or you can visit s.id/feedbackafmgm. On behalf of the host and the committee, we'd like to extend our appreciation to all of you and hope that we got lots of valuable insight from the dialogue and discussion to contribute to the strengthening of Asian cooperation. I'm Rumonda Lubis. Good afternoon. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.